Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin jointly buried the U.S. peace order in Moscow, the 29th of March. 2023 645 HRS. Last week in Moscow, the presidents of China and Russia expressed their joint commitment to reshaping the global order, an undertaking like not seen in 100 years. By Pepe Escobar.
What took place in Moscow last week was nothing less than a reenactment of the Yalta Conference of February 1945 in that memorable place, which incidentally is in Crimea. But unlike the momentous meeting of U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill with Soviet leader Josef Stalin, this is the first time in probably 5 centuries that a Western political leader no longer sets the global agenda. Rather, today it is Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin who present a multilateral, multipolar vision. The Western masterminds can pull their crybaby stunt as often as they like. Nothing will change the spectacular optics and underlying substance for this evolving new world order, especially for the global South. What Xi and Putin are up to was explained in detail before their summit in 2 commentaries written by the presidents themselves. People's Daily in China described Putin's vision as a perfect Russian ballet, focusing on a forward-looking partnership, while Xi's vision was published in the Russian Gazette and on the RIA Novosti website, focusing on a new chapter of cooperation and joint development. Right at the start of the summit, Xi and Putin's speeches drove the NATO crowd into a hysterical frenzy of anger and envy. Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova captured the mood perfectly when she remarked that the West was foaming at the mouth. The front page of this Russian Gazette on Monday is a perfect allegory. Putin's visits Mariupol, liberated from the neo-Nazi hordes, and chats with residents, while Xi Jinping's vision was printed in the same issue. This was Moscow's compressed, dry response to Washington's stunt with the MQ-9 Reaper drone and to the hoaxer from the International Criminal Court's ICC, Kangaroo Court. Just foam at the mouth all you want. NATO is being thoroughly humiliated in Ukraine. At their first informal meeting, Xi and Putin talked for no less than 4.5 hours. At the end, Putin personally accompanied the Chinese leader to his limousine. This conversation dealt with the real core topic of the meeting, outlining the main features of multipolarity, which starts with a solution for Ukraine. Predictably, there were very few leaks from around the meeting, except for one rather significant leak about their in-depth exchange on Ukraine. Putin politely stressed that he respected China's position, which had been expressed in Beijing's 12-point plan for resolving the conflict and rejected outright from Washington, D.C., but still, he said, the Russian position remains ironclad: demilitarization of Ukraine, Ukraine's military neutrality, and anchoring the new realities on the ground. In parallel, the Russian Foreign Ministry completely ruled out any role for the U.S., the UK, France, and Germany in future Ukraine negotiations. They are no longer considered neutral mediators.
A multipolar patchwork.
The second day of the meeting was all about trade, from energy to military technical cooperation to improving the efficiency of trade and economic corridors across Eurasia. Russia already ranks first as a supplier of natural gas to China, ahead of Turkmenistan and Qatar, largely thanks to the 3,000 kilometers Sila Sibiri Power of Siberia pipeline running from Siberia to China's northeastern Heilongjiang province, which became operational in December 2019. Negotiations on the Sila Sibiri 2 pipeline, which will cross Mongolia, are progressing rapidly. Sino-Russian cooperation in the high-tech sector is going through the roof. A total of 79 projects with an equivalent value of more than $165 billion range from liquefied natural gas (LNG) to aircraft construction, machine tool building, space research, agribusiness, and modernized economic corridors. The Chinese president explicitly emphasized that he wanted to link the new Silk Road Belt and Road Initiative projects with the Eurasian Economic Union (EEU). This linking of the two initiatives is a natural development. China has already signed an economic cooperation agreement with the EEU. The ideas of Russian macroeconomic superstrategist Sergei Glaziev are finally bearing fruit. And last but not least, there will be a new trend between Asia, Africa, and Latin America towards mutual settlements in national currencies. For practical reasons, Putin advocated the role of the Chinese yuan as the new trade currency of first choice, while the complex discussions about a new reserve currency backed by gold and/or commodities continue. This joint economic and trade offensive follows on from the concerted diplomatic offensive between Russia and China to reshape much of West Asia and Africa. Chinese diplomacy works like the popular Russian matryoshka when it comes to delivering subtle messages. It is far from coincidental that Xi Jinping's trip to Moscow coincided exactly with the 20th anniversary of the U.S. military use of shock and awe tactics in the illegal invasion of Iraq and its occupation and destruction. In parallel, over 40 delegations from Africa arrived in Moscow a day before Xi's visit to attend the parliamentary conference Russia, Africa in the Multipolar World, in preparation for the second Russia-Africa summit next July. The surroundings of the Russian State Duma looked exactly as they did in the days of the non-aligned movement, when most of Africa had very close anti-imperialist relations with the USSR. And Putin chose exactly this moment to cancel African debts amounting to more than $20 billion. In West Asia, Russia and China are acting completely in sync. The recent rapprochement between Saudis and Iran was originally spurred by Russia in Baghdad and Oman. It was these negotiations that led to the signing of the agreement in Beijing. Moscow, meanwhile, is also coordinating the rapprochement talks between Syria and Turkey. Russian diplomacy with Iran, now at the level of a strategic partnership, is being pursued on a separate track. Diplomatic sources confirm that Chinese intelligence, through its own investigations, is now fully convinced of Putin's enormous popularity across Russia and even within the country's political elites. This means that regime change-type conspiracies are out of the question. This was fundamental to Xi and China's top leadership in Zhou Nanhai's decision to bet on Putin as a trusted partner in the coming years, given that he will run and probably win in the next presidential election. China has always been about continuity. Thus, the summit meeting of Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin finally sealed the comprehensive strategic partnership of China and Russia in the long run, pledging in the process to develop a serious geopolitical and geoeconomic competition with the declining Western hegemony. This is the new world that was born in Moscow last week. Putin had previously defined this as a new anti-colonial policy. This is now designed as a multipolar network. Now there is no turning back in the dismantling of the remnants of the Pax Americana, the so-called peace order dictated by the U.S. for this world.
Changes not seen for 100 years.
In her book, Before European Hegemony, The World System Between 1250 and 1350, sociologist Janet Abu-Lughod set up a carefully constructed narrative showing the prevailing multipolar order as the West lagged behind the Orient. Later, the West had only passed by because the Orient was temporarily in disarray. We may just be witnessing a similar change of historical proportions, marked by a revival of Confucianism, the respect for authority and the emphasis on social harmony, the inner balance of the Tao, and the spiritual power of Eastern Orthodoxy. This is indeed a civilizational struggle. Moscow, finally welcoming the first sunny days of spring, last week provided a larger-than-life illustration of weeks that are like decades compared to decades in which nothing happens. The two presidents bid farewell to each other in a poignant manner.
Xi Jinping, now there are changes that have not happened for 100 years. As long as we stay together, we will drive these changes. Vladimir Putin.
I agree with that. Xi Jinping.
Take care, my dear friend.
Vladimir Putin.
Have a good trip.
Here dawns a new day from the lands of the rising sun to the Eurasian steppes. Translated from English, Pepe Escobar is an independent geopolitical analyst and author. His latest book is called Raging 20s. He has been banned from Facebook and Twitter for political reasons, but you can follow him on Telegram.